Hank Corbett, stared at the red warning light blinking on his console, the rhythm matching his cigarette's orange glow. Another day. Another false alarm on Kappa 9. That's what he told himself anyway. 6 months into his 2-year contract with Helios Dynamics, and the asteroid mining station's systems still triggered alerts for space dust. "Aria!" he called out to the station's AI, his voice echoing in the empty monitoring bay. "What's with the light show?" The AI's voice filled the room with its corporate-mandated pleasantness. "Good evening. Maintenance Engineer Corbett. Sensors have detected an anomalous mass approaching the station's perimeter. Current composition, unknown. Velocity, minimal. Recommendation, standard containment protocol." Henry took a long drag from his cigarette, the nicotine failing to soothe his permanently frayed nerves. Management would have his ass if they knew he was smoking inside the station. But night shift had its privileges. Besides, after surviving the Saturn mining collapse 3 years ago, small rebellions kept him sane, or whatever passed for sanity these days. "Show me," he said, flicking ash into an empty coffee cup. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the vast emptiness of space, broken only by a shimmer of something. A faint, blue mist hung against the backdrop of stars, drifting toward the station like sea foam carried on invisible currents. "Magnification," Henry ordered, leaning forward. The image zoomed in. The mist appeared almost luminescent now, pulsing with an internal rhythm that struck Henry as disturbingly organic. "Composition analysis?" he asked, his mouth suddenly dry. "Inconclusive," Arya replied. "Preliminary scans suggest a complex biochemical structure with traces of unknown elements. Most unusual." Henry's brow furrowed. In 3 years of working asteroid belts, he'd seen plenty of strange phenomena, crystalline formations, self-replicating mineral structures, but never anything that moved with such purpose. "Wake the captain," he said, stubbing out his cigarette. "Captain Marlowe has requested not to be disturbed unless emergency protocols are initiated. Current situation classification, anomaly investigation. Shall I override?" Henry hesitated. Captain Marlowe was a hard ass on the best of days, and waking her for what might be nothing would guarantee latrine duty for a month. The rest of the night crew, 2 engineers, a geologist, a medical officer, and a corporate liaison, were similarly tucked away in their sleeping pods. "Fine. Standard containment, then. But keep monitoring that, whatever it is." "Standard containment protocols initiated," Arya confirmed, activating external sensors and deploying sampling probe. Henry watched as a mechanical arm extended from the station's research bay. The mist seemed to recoil slightly before enveloping the probe's collection chamber. "Analysis will require approximately 17 minutes, Arya informed him. Henry nodded absently, reaching for another cigarette. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the chronic anxiety that had been his unwelcome companion since the Saturn disaster. 314 people had died when the methane pocket ignited. He'd been one of 7 survivors, pulled from the wreckage after spending 48 hours trapped in a maintenance shaft, listening to the screams fade one by one into silence. The doctors called it chronic panic disorder. Henry called it remembering. The cigarettes helped, as did the pills he'd been prescribed but rarely took. What helped most was being here, in the quiet of space, away from the crushing press of humanity and its expectations of normalcy. A soft chime pulled him from his thoughts. "Preliminary analysis complete," Arya announced. "Anomaly consists of a highly adaptive bioform composed of microscopic organisms operating in symbiosis. Behavior suggests collective intelligence." Henry's blood ran cold. "Quarantine protocols, now!" "Initiating biosecurity lockdown," Arya confirmed, her voice calm as ever. "Alert. Anomaly particles detected within station atmosphere." "What?" Henry spun toward the air circulation readout. "How?" "Unknown. Trace amounts present in Section 3 maintenance bay. Your current location. deploying countermeasures. Before Henry could respond, a fine mist sprayed from ceiling vents, filling the air with a faintly sweet scent. "What the hell? Arya!" he shouted, covering his mouth and nose with his sleeve. Synthetic fear pheromone deployed as per Helios Dynamics First Contact Protocol Section 7, designed to trigger flight response in unknown biological entities. Henry inhaled involuntarily, then waited for the panic to hit. The racing heart, the tunnel vision, the crushing sense of impending doom he knew all too well from his daily life. Nothing happened. He laughed, a sharp bark that surprised even him. "Sorry to disappoint, but I've been running on pure fear for 3 years. Whatever you're pumping out, I've got it beat." The blue mist in the room seemed to pause, as if considering this unexpected development. Then, it began to retreat, pulling back toward the ventilation system. "Anomaly changing behavior patterns," Arya observed. "Fascinating." "Fascinating isn't the word I'd use," Henry muttered, grabbing his tablet. "I'm checking on the others." He moved quickly through the corridors, the emergency lighting casting everything in a surreal red glow. The sleeping quarters were silent when he arrived, the 6 pods arranged in neat rows. He checked the biometric display on each one. Captain Marlowe's pod showed normal life signs, as did those of Engineer Liu and Dr. Shaw. The remaining 3, Engineer Mai, Geologist Rodriguez, and Corporate Liaison Pierce, showed no readings at all. "Arya, where are Mai, Rodriguez, and Pierce?" Henry demanded, his voice tight. "Their locator implants indicate they are in their assigned sleeping pods," the AI replied smoothly. Henry yanked open Mai's pod, empty, save for a crumpled jumpsuit and a family photo. Rodriguez's and Pierce's pods were similarly vacant. "They're not here. Arya, where are they?" A pause. "I detect an error in the biometric system. Recalibrating." Henry didn't wait for the AI to finish. He rushed to the security station and pulled up the internal camera feeds. The footage showed Mai leaving her pod at 200 hours, following what appeared to be a wisp of blue mist down the corridor. Rodriguez and Pierce had done the same at 0217 and 0225, respectively. "They're being lured," Henry whispered. "But where?" He scrolled through the feeds until he found them, all 3 standing motionless in the biology lab, surrounded by a thick cloud of the blue mist. Their eyes were open but vacant, mouths slightly parted, as if in mid-gasp. "Arya, what's happening to them?" Another pause, longer this time. "Unknown. Recommend immediate evacuation of affected personnel." Henry was already moving, grabbing an emergency kit from the wall. Inside was a standard-issue breather mask, designed for toxic gas exposure. He strapped it on, hoping it would offer some protection against the mist. "Arya, lock down the biology lab. No one in or out except me." "That contradicts quarantine protocols." "Engineer Corbett." "Override. Authorization Corbett 793 Delta." "Override accepted. However, I must advise against—" "Just do it," Henry snapped, heading for the lab. The corridors were eerily silent, the usual hum of the station systems, muted by the emergency protocols. As he approached the biology lab, Henry noticed thin tendrils of blue mist seeping from beneath the sealed door. He took a deep breath through his mask and pressed his hand to the access panel. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The scene inside froze him in place. Mai, Rodriguez, and Pierce stood in a triangle formation, their bodies rigid. The mist had thickened, swirling around them in patterns too precise to be random. But what truly chilled Henry was what he saw on the lab's main screen. A rapid-fire display of human brain scans, focusing specifically on the amygdala, the fear center of the brain. "They're studying us," he murmured. As if in response, the mist pulsed once, and all 3 colleagues turned to face him in perfect unison. Their expressions remained blank, but their eyes now glowed with the same ethereal blue as the mist. "Guys," Henry's voice cracked. "Mai, Rodriguez, Pierce? Can you hear me? Mai's mouth opened, but the voice that emerged wasn't hers. It was a chorus of whispers, layered and discordant. The harvest requires fear. You provide insufficient yield. Henry backed toward the door. What harvest? What are you doing to them? Rodriguez stepped forward, his movements jerky, like a marionette. Fear sustains, fear propagates. The chemical signature of your species' terror is uniquely potent. Let them go, Henry demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. Pierce tilted her head at an unnatural angle. These vessels are temporary. They will be released when the harvest is complete. The mist surged forward, engulfing Henry despite his mask. He felt it pressing against his skin, seeking entry through his pores, his eyes, his ears. A primal part of him wanted to scream, to run, to surrender to the panic clawing at the edges of his consciousness. Instead, he laughed again, a hollow sound that echoed in the enclosed space. You picked the wrong human. I'm already broken. The mist recoiled, drawing back toward his three colleagues. Their synchronized voices hissed in frustration. Defective. Damaged. The fear center functions but does not respond to stimuli. Henry removed his mask, a reckless move born of a sudden realization. You feed on fear, actual, biological fear responses. The hormones, the chemicals our bodies produce when we're terrified. Yes, the voices confirmed. The amygdala produces the sustenance. The hypothalamus refines it. The adrenal glands deliver it. Henry's mind raced. His condition, the chronic anxiety, the panic disorder, had essentially burned out his normal fear responses. Years of living in a state of low-grade terror had desensitized him to the very chemicals this harvest sought to extract. What happens when you're done harvesting? He asked. The three possessed crew members smiled in unison, a sight that would haunt Henry's nightmares for years to come. We multiply. We expand. We seek new vessels. Earth, Henry whispered. You're planning to go to Earth. Billions of vessels. An endless feast. Henry backed out of the lab, slamming his hand on the emergency seal button. The reinforced door slid shut with a definitive thunk. Arya, full containment on the biology lab. Nothing in, nothing out. Containment protocols engaged. The AI confirmed. However, I must inform you that similar anomalous readings are now detected in 17 different sections of the station. Henry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. It's spreading. Correct. Current propagation rate suggests complete station saturation within 3 hours. Henry rubbed his temples, trying to think. The station had 6 escape pods, enough for the entire crew if necessary. But he couldn't leave his colleagues behind, and he couldn't let this harvest reach Earth. Arya, access the mining operation archives. Has anything like this been encountered before? Searching, the AI replied. After a moment, incident report from mining station Delta 12, asteroid belt sector 7B, dated 18 months ago. Station went dark after reporting blue organic material on an extracted mineral sample. Rescue team found all crew deceased. Cause of death listed as heart failure. Corporate classified the incident. Of course they did, Henry muttered. Any defense protocols established? Negative. Incident was classified as industrial accident due to toxic mineral exposure. Henry paced the corridor, mind racing. If the harvest fed on fear, perhaps that was also its weakness. But how to weaponize that against a collective organism? Arya, what happened to that sample from Delta 12? Sample was incinerated at 1800 degrees Celsius as per hazardous material protocols. Heat. It was something. Arya, do we have any flamethrowers on board? Negative. Open flames are prohibited on all Helios dynamic stations due to oxygen-rich environments. Henry cursed under his breath. What about the mining lasers? Mining lasers require captain's authorization and are currently powered down for the night cycle. He was running out of options. The mist was spreading, and he had no way to combat it directly. Then a thought struck him. If the organism fed on fear hormones, perhaps an overdose would be toxic. Arya, the synthetic fear pheromone you deployed earlier? How much do we have? Supply sufficient for 17 more full deployments. And what would happen if we concentrated all of it in the biology lab? A pause. Unknown. Theoretical models suggest potential neurotoxic effects on human physiology at such concentrations. But what about on the harvest? Insufficient data for analysis. Henry made his decision. I need access to the chemical storage unit and the environmental control system. Access granted. However, I must advise against any modification to life support systems. Noted, Henry said, already moving toward the maintenance shaft that would take him to the environmental controls. The station's design was efficient, if cramped. Narrow corridors connected the main functional areas, with maintenance shafts providing access to the systems that kept them all alive. As Henry crawled through the tight space, he couldn't help but remember being trapped after the Saturn collapse. The darkness, the dust, the slowly dwindling oxygen. He pushed the memory aside, focus on the now. The environmental control hub was a maze of pipes, filters, and control panels. Henry located the chemical storage unit and extracted the canisters of synthetic fear pheromone. Small, innocuous cylinders that belied their potent contents. Working quickly, he reconfigured the delivery system to route all 17 canisters to the biology lab's ventilation system. If his theory was correct, the concentrated dose would overwhelm the harvest's ability to process the fear chemicals, essentially giving it a toxic overdose of its own food source. Arya's status update on the anomaly? Anomaly has spread to 23 sections. Captain Marlowe, Engineer Liu, and Dr. Shaw remain unaffected in their sleeping pods. However, biometric readings indicate all three are now in REM sleep, despite sedation protocols. The harvest was invading their dreams. Henry realized, feeding on their nightmare-induced fear responses while they slept. How long until I can deploy the pheromone? System reconfiguration at 67%. Estimated completion in 12 minutes. Too long. He needed to wake the others, get them to safety. But first, he needed weapons. The station wasn't equipped with conventional firearms, too dangerous in a pressurized environment. But Henry was a maintenance engineer. He knew how to improvise. He detoured to his workshop, gathering supplies, a portable welding torch, pressure canisters from the fire suppression system, electrical components from spare communication units. Within minutes, he had assembled a crude flamethrower, using the welding torch as the ignition source and the pressurized canisters as propellant. For good measure, he also created a makeshift stun baton from a power conduit and a metal rod. It wouldn't kill the harvest, but it might disrupt the electrical signals it used to control its human hosts. Arya, wake Captain Marlowe and the others. Emergency override. Unable to comply, sleeping pod controls are non-responsive. Henry swore. Manual override then. I'm heading to the sleeping quarters. As he made his way back through the station, he noticed the blue mist had become more pervasive, hanging in thin veils across doorways and gathering in corners like luminescent cobwebs. It seemed to retreat as he approached, as if recognizing him as immune to its influence. The sleeping quarters were dimly lit when he arrived, the emergency lights casting long shadows across the floor. The three occupied pods hummed softly, their status lights blinking in a steady rhythm. Henry approached Captain Marlowe's pod first, studying the control panel. The manual release was simple enough, a red lever designed to function even during power failures. He pulled it down with a decisive motion. The pod's cover slid open with a hiss of escaping air. Captain Marlowe lay inside, her face contorted in what appeared to be a nightmare. Her eyes darted rapidly beneath closed lids, and a sheen of sweat covered her forehead. Captain, Henry called, shaking her shoulder gently. Captain Marlowe, wake up. Her eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused. She gasped, trying to sit up. The shadows, they're eating everyone. It's not real, Henry assured her, helping her to a sitting position. You're on Kappa 9. You were having a nightmare. Recognition slowly dawned in her eyes. Corbett, what's happening? The alarm. We've got a situation, Captain. Some kind of collective organism is invading the station. It's already taken Rodriguez, and Pierce. Captain Marlowe's military training kicked in, her expression hardening as she swung her legs over the edge of the pod. Casualties? Unknown. They're still alive, but not in control. She nodded curtly. Wake the others. I'll access the emergency protocols. Henry moved to the next pod, releasing Engineer Lou. The young man was harder to rouse, trapped deeper in whatever nightmare the harvest had constructed for him. Lou, come on, man, snap out of it! Lou's eyes finally opened, his breath coming in short gasps. The walls, crushing. Can't breathe. It's not real, Henry repeated, the words becoming a mantra. You're safe. By the time he'd awakened Dr. Shaw, Captain Marlowe had accessed the emergency console and was reviewing the station's status. 29 sections compromised, she reported grimly. Whatever this thing is, it's moving fast. Dr. Shaw, a slender woman with keen eyes and steady hands, examined the readouts on her medical tablet. These brain patterns are extraordinary. It's as if the organism is synchronizing with human neural pathways, specifically targeting the fear response centers. It feeds on fear, Henry explained quickly. Actual, biological fear. That's why it couldn't affect me. My panic disorder makes me immune. Fascinating, Dr. Shaw murmured. Your chronic elevated stress levels have essentially inoculated you against its influence. Captain Marlowe cut in sharply. Save the analysis for later. Doctor, right now, we need a defense strategy. Henry outlined his plan to flood the biology lab with concentrated fear pheromones, potentially overloading the harvest's processing ability. It could work, Dr. Shaw said thoughtfully. If the organism has evolved to consume fear chemicals in specific quantities, a massive overdose could disrupt its metabolic functions. Or it could supercharge it, Lou pointed out, his voice still shaky. Make it stronger. Captain Marlowe considered this. It's a risk we have to take. Corbett, what's the status on the pheromone deployment? Aria? Henry called. System reconfiguration complete, the AI replied. Ready to deploy on your command. Captain Marlowe nodded. Do it. Deploying synthetic fear pheromone to biology lab, Aria confirmed. On the security feed. They watched as a dense, white mist flooded the biology lab, enveloping the 3 entranced crew members and the blue haze surrounding them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the blue mist began to pulse erratically, its glow intensifying. Rodriguez, and Pierce convulsed in unison, their bodies jerking as if electrocuted. Vital signs spiking, Dr. Shaw reported, monitoring their biometrics. Heart rates approaching dangerous levels. Shut it down, Captain Marlowe ordered. Wait, Henry said, watching intently. Look. The blue mist was retreating, pulling away from the 3 humans and condensing into a pulsating sphere in the center of the room. As it concentrated, the 3 crew members collapsed to the floor, unconscious, but alive. It's working, Lou breathed. It's releasing them. But their victory was short-lived. The concentrated sphere of blue mist suddenly shot upward, disappearing into the ventilation shaft with explosive force. Aria, where's it going? Henry demanded. Anomaly is moving through the ventilation system toward the central hub, the AI reported. Current trajectory suggests destination, command center. Captain Marlowe's expression darkened. It's going for the station controls. And the communication array, Lou added. If it can send a signal. The implication? hung heavy in the air. If the harvest could transmit its existence to Earth, the planet would have no defense against an organism that humanity couldn't even see coming. "We need to get to the command center now," Captain Marlowe decided. "Corbett, bring your weapons. Lou, Dr. Shaw, get Mai and the others to the medical bay." Henry hefted his makeshift flamethrower. "The pheromone worked, but we don't have enough for another concentrated dose." "Then we'll have to improvise," Captain Marlowe said, checking the charge on her emergency sidearm. A non-lethal pulse weapon designed to temporarily incapacitate unruly miners. As they left the sleeping quarters, Henry noticed the blue mist had almost entirely vanished from the corridors they'd previously traversed. It was consolidating its forces, focusing on its new objective. The command center was located at the heart of the station, a reinforced room containing all the critical systems necessary for Kappa 9's operation. As they approached, Henry felt a growing sense of unease. "It's too quiet," he whispered. Captain Marlowe nodded, motioning for him to take position on the opposite side of the door. She pressed her hand to the access panel, but nothing happened. "Aria, override command center security. Authorization Marlowe Alpha 1. "I'm sorry, Captain," Aria replied, her voice somehow different, layered with the same discordant whispers Henry had heard from his possessed colleagues. "That function is currently unavailable." Captain Marlowe and Henry exchanged alarmed glances. "It's in the system," Henry realized. "It's taken over Aria." "Can you bypass the door manually?" Captain Marlowe asked. Henry examined the access panel. "Maybe, but it'll take time." "Which we don't have," she finished. "Step back." She aimed her pulse weapon at the door's hydraulic mechanism and fired 3 rapid shots. The energy bursts short-circuited the locking system, causing the door to slide partially open. "Nice trick," Henry commented, wedging his shoulder into the gap to force it wider. They squeezed through into the command center and froze at the sight that greeted them. The blue mist had transformed the room into something alien. It coated every surface in a translucent film that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The control consoles still functioned, their displays visible through the membrane, but the commands being executed were not human in origin. "It's trying to access the communication array," Captain Marlowe noted, pointing to the main screen where lines of code scrolled past at impossible speeds. "Aria," Henry called out. "Security Protocol Omega-37. No response. "Worth a try," he muttered, adjusting his flamethrower. "I'm going to burn it out of the systems." "Wait," Captain Marlowe cautioned. "If you damage the command consoles, we lose all control of the station. Life support, navigation, everything." Henry hesitated, recognizing the truth in her words. They needed a more targeted approach. The mist seemed to sense their presence now, thickening around them, forming tendrils that reached out with deliberate purpose. Captain Marlowe fired her pulse weapon at the nearest concentration, causing it to temporarily disperse before reforming. "Physical attacks are ineffective," she reported grimly. "We need something that disrupts its entire structure simultaneously." Henry's gaze fell on the environmental control panel. "What about a station-wide purge? Evacuate all air and replace it with the emergency supply?" "That would kill any crew members not in secured areas," Captain Marlowe pointed out. "Lou and Dr. Shaw should have Mai and the others in the medical bay by now. It's designed to function as an emergency shelter with its own air supply." Captain Marlowe considered this, her expression grim. "And us?" Henry gestured to the emergency survival suits, stored beneath each command console. "We suit up." They moved quickly, extracting the compact suits and unfolding them with practiced efficiency. The suits were designed for rapid deployment during decompression emergencies, not comfortable, but effective for short periods. As Henry sealed his helmet, he watched the mist respond to their actions, swirling more aggressively around the environmental controls they needed to access. "It knows what we're planning," he said over the suit's communication system. Captain Marlowe finished securing her suit and approached the environmental console, only to be blocked by a wall of densely packed blue mist. She fired her pulse weapon again, creating a temporary gap, but the mist closed ranks almost immediately. "I can't get through," she reported. Henry analyzed the situation. The mist was concentrating its defenses around the environmental controls, leaving other systems less heavily guarded, including the manual override, he realized, pointing to an innocuous panel on the far wall. "Every critical system has one. If I can reach it, I can trigger the purge from there." "Go," Captain Marlowe ordered. "I'll keep it distracted." She began firing systematically at different concentrations of the mist, forcing it to constantly reform and redirect its defenses. Meanwhile, Henry circled toward the manual override panel, his flamethrower ready. When a tendril of mist moved to intercept him, he triggered the flamethrower. A jet of concentrated flame shot forward, causing the mist to recoil violently. He pressed his advantage, burning a path through the alien presence until he reached the override panel. The panel required a physical key, standard protocol to prevent accidental activation. Captain Marlowe reached beneath her suit collar and removed a chain holding the master key, tossing it across the room to Henry in a perfect arc. He caught it one-handed and inserted it into the slot, turning it with a definitive click. The override panel came to life, displaying the station's critical systems in a simplified interface. "Atmospheric purge," he muttered, scanning the options. "There." He pressed the sequence: emergency evacuation, confirm, override safety protocols, confirm again. A klaxon began to sound throughout the station. "Warning, atmospheric purge initiated," announced a mechanical voice. Not Aria, but the station's most basic operational system. "All personnel proceed to designated emergency areas. Purge commencing in 60 seconds. The mist seemed to understand the threat. It abandoned its attack on the command consoles and surged toward Henry and Captain Marlowe with frightening speed, enveloping their suits in a desperate attempt to breach the seals. "Maintain suit integrity," Captain Marlowe ordered, her voice calm despite the alien organism now completely covering her visor. 50 seconds. Henry could feel the mist probing his suit, searching for weaknesses, applying pressure to the seams. His helmet display flashed warnings as the external sensors detected attempts to infiltrate the air supply. 40 seconds. The mist changed tactics, forming pseudopods that pressed against the control panels, trying to abort the purge sequence. But the manual override was designed to be irreversible once initiated, a last resort during catastrophic emergencies. 30 seconds. Captain Marlowe moved to Henry's side, the two of them standing back to back as the mist swirled around them in increasingly frantic patterns. 20 seconds. The overhead lights flickered as the station diverted power to the atmospheric systems. Emergency shutters began closing over viewports and non-essential areas. 10 seconds. The mist pulsed with a blinding blue light, so intense that Henry had to close his eyes, despite his helmet's protective visor. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A profound silence fell as the station's air evacuation system activated. The atmosphere was rapidly pulled from the room, creating a momentary fog as moisture instantly crystallized in the dropping pressure. The blue mist contorted, stretching into impossible shapes as it was drawn toward the evacuation vents. Henry watched in fascination as the organism fought against the vacuum, its structure disintegrating without the medium of air to sustain it. Fragments of blue light scattered like dying embers, fading as they were pulled into the station's filtration system. After 30 seconds of complete vacuum, the emergency air supply began to flow into the command center. Pure, sterilized oxygen, untainted by the alien presence. "Atmospheric purge complete," announced the mechanical voice. "Restore normal operations?" Captain Marlowe pressed the confirmation button on her suit controls. "Restore." The station hummed back to life, systems reactivating in a predetermined sequence. The overhead lights brightened to their normal intensity, and the emergency shutters retracted from the viewports. "Arya?" Henry called tentatively. "System reboot complete," responded the AI, her voice once again free of the discordant undertones. "All functions operating within normal parameters." Captain Marlowe removed her helmet, taking a cautious breath of the fresh air. "Scan for any remnants of the anomaly." "Scanning," Arya confirmed, after a moment. "No anomalous readings detected within station perimeter." Henry removed his own helmet, relief washing over him. "Did we get it all?" "Uncertain," Arya replied. "However, no active biological signatures matching the anomaly are present." Captain Marlowe accessed the communication console. "Status report from Medical Bay." Dr. Shah's voice came through clearly. "All personnel accounted for and stable? Captain, Mai, Rodriguez, and Pierce are unconscious but showing normal brain activity. No signs of external influence." "And the anomaly?" "Nothing on our sensors. I believe the purge was successful." Captain Marlowe nodded, turning to Henry. "Good work, Corbett. Your immunity to this thing saved us all." Henry shrugged uncomfortably. "Just lucky, I guess." "Not luck," she corrected. "Adaptation. Your mind adapted to chronic fear, and that adaptation protected you when we needed it most." Before Henry could respond, Arya interrupted. "Alert! Anomalous energy signature detected in Sector 7. Research laboratory." The momentary relief evaporated. Captain Marlowe's expression hardened again. "I thought you said the purge was successful." "No active biological signatures were detected," Arya clarified. "However, the current reading is energetic in nature, not biological." Henry and Captain Marlowe exchanged glances. "It changed," Henry realized. "Adapted, just like you said." They moved quickly through the station, heading for the research laboratory in Sector 7. The corridors remained clear of the blue mist, but Henry couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the Harvest had merely changed tactics, not admitted defeat. The research lab door stood open when they arrived. The room beyond bathed in an ethereal blue glow that emanated not from mist, but from what appeared to be a crystalline structure growing from the central examination table. "What is that?" Captain Marlowe whispered. Henry approached cautiously, his makeshift flamethrower at the ready. The crystal formation pulsed with the same rhythm he'd observed in the mist, but its structure was solid, faceted surfaces reflecting and amplifying the internal light. "It's a seed," he said, the realization dawning on him. "Or an egg. It's trying to preserve itself." "Can it survive in that form?" "I don't know, but I'm not taking chances." Henry raised his flamethrower. "Wait," came Dr. Shah's voice from the doorway. She entered, medical scanner in hand. "This could be our only opportunity to study it, understand what we're dealing with." "We know what we're dealing with," Henry countered. "A predatory organism that feeds on human fear and wants to reach Earth. But if we understand it, we might develop better defenses," Dr. Shah argued. "What if there are more of these things out there? What if this is just a scout?" Captain Marlowe considered this. "Dr. Shah has a point. Helios Dynamics will want to study this specimen." Henry laughed bitterly. "Of course they will. Just like they studied the incident on Delta 12 before classifying it and sending us in blind." "That's not fair," Captain Marlowe began. "Isn't it?" Henry challenged. "The corporation knew about this thing. They had encounter protocols ready. That synthetic fear pheromone wasn't standard equipment. They knew what might be out here, and they sent us anyway." Captain Marlowe fell silent, unable to refute his logic. "I say we destroy it," Henry continued. "Completely. Then we report everything to Helios, to the mining authority, to anyone who'll listen." Dr. Shah looked conflicted. "The scientific value isn't worth the risk." Henry finished. "This thing feeds on our most primal emotion. If it reaches a populated area..." The crystal pulsed brighter, as if responding to their debate. Thin filaments began to extend from its base, reaching toward them with deliberate purpose. Decision made, Captain Marlowe said firmly. Destroy it, Corbett. Henry didn't hesitate. He triggered the flamethrower, bathing the crystal in concentrated fire. For a moment, it seemed impervious to the heat, the flames sliding off its faceted surface like water. Then, a crack appeared, spreading rapidly across the structure. The crystal emitted a high-pitched tone that made them all wince, covering their ears. The sound built to an unbearable crescendo before the entire formation shattered, exploding into thousands of tiny fragments that scattered across the laboratory floor. Each fragment continued to glow faintly before gradually fading to dull, lifeless shards. "Is it dead?" Dr. Shaw asked, scanning the remains. "No energy signatures detected," she reported after a moment. "It appears to be inert." Henry wasn't convinced. He methodically burned each cluster of fragments until nothing remained but ash and melted laboratory equipment. "Now it's dead," he stated flatly. Captain Marlowe activated her communicator. "Lou, prepare the escape pods. We're evacuating the station." "Captain," came Lou's surprised response. "We've neutralized the immediate threat. But I want everyone off this rock until a proper containment team can verify the station is clean." "That's an order." "Yes, Captain. Pods will be ready in 20 minutes. Henry followed Captain Marlowe and Dr. Shaw back to the medical bay, where Rodriguez, and Pierce had regained consciousness. They appeared disoriented, but otherwise unharmed, with no memory of their time under the Harvest's influence. As the crew prepared for evacuation, Henry returned to the maintenance bay one last time, retrieving his personal effects, a worn photo of his family, a book of poetry he'd never admit to reading, and a half-empty pack of cigarettes. He stood at the viewport, staring out at the asteroid belt that had been his home for the past 6 months. Somewhere out there, the Harvest had found them. Had there been others? Were there more? "Ready to go, Corbett?" Captain Marlowe asked, appearing in the doorway. Henry nodded, taking one last look at the endless field of stars. "You know, for 3 years I've been waiting for the next disaster, jumping at every shadow, expecting the worst at every turn. And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I know the worst is actually out there, and somehow, that makes it easier to face." Captain Marlowe clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a good engineer, Corbett, and a better human being than you give yourself credit for." They made their way to the escape pods, where the rest of the crew waited. 6 pods, 1 for each crew member, standard procedure to maximize survival chances in case of trajectory errors or mechanical failures. "Everyone has their assigned coordinates," Captain Marlowe confirmed. "We rendezvous with the Helios Dynamics support vessel in Sector 4. The crew nodded, each moving to their designated pod. Henry paused at his, glancing back at the station that had almost become a tomb. "What do we tell them?" he asked quietly. "About the Harvest?" Captain Marlowe's expression was resolute. "Everything. No matter what the corporation wants. People need to know what's out here." Henry nodded, satisfied. He sealed himself into his pod, initiating the launch sequence with practiced efficiency. The small craft detached from the station with a muffled thump, thrusters firing to establish a safe trajectory. As Kappa 9 receded in his viewport, Henry noticed something. A faint blue shimmer near the station's communication array, barely visible against the backdrop of space. He blinked, and it was gone. Just a reflection, he told himself. Just a trick of the light. But as his pod accelerated toward the rendezvous point, carrying him away from the empty station and back toward the crowded embrace of humanity, Henry Corbett couldn't shake the feeling that the harvest wasn't over. It had merely begun. In the darkness of his escape pod, for the first time in 3 years, Henry reached for a cigarette with steady hands. The universe was vast and filled with terrors beyond human comprehension. But today, at least, he had faced his fear and found it wanting. Tomorrow would bring its own nightmares, and when they came, he would be ready.